My name is David Lopez, Co-Dean of Rutgers Law School in Newark, New Jersey, and this is The Power of Attorney. Today, I have a real treat for all of you. Today, I am joined by David Yawman. He's the Executive Vice President and General Counsel and Corporate Secretary of PepsiCo. I've been wanting to have you on the show for a long time, so welcome. How are you?
Great, Dean. That's a good morning to you, and it's great to be here with you.
So your title is the Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary. That's a real mouthful. But talk about generally what you do as a General Counsel.
Yeah, sure. And it's certainly, if you flash back to my time at Rutgers in 1995, I never would have predicted to have had the title or job that I have, which is just a lesson. And, you never know exactly where life and a legal education is going to take you. But these days, PepsiCo is a Fortune 50 company, and we work in almost 200 countries around the globe, essentially in the food and beverages industry. I'm sure many people that are listening interact with PepsiCo products every day, whether it's Pepsi or Tropicana or Quaker Oats or Gatorade or products like that. But when you work in that many places around the world and you have the 265,000 or so employees that we have, there's a whole variety of issues that pop up, and it's wonderful to work with the board of directors and our CEO and frankly all of our management teams, and just trying to make sure that we do business in the smart, responsible way all around the globe, from following the laws in all those jurisdictions to taking care of our people who are working hard in all those jurisdictions, to interacting with all the policy issues that we interact with, from the plastics issues to obesity issues to various other public policy issues. And so every day is a gift, and every gift is a little bit different. In my experience, I've been at PepsiCo 22 years, and it's just been a wonderful journey and a wonderful ride. But it's a big world that gets a little bit smaller because I work at PepsiCo and hear about things that are going on in different parts of the world every day.
Yeah, and I want to really drill down on what your average day looks like and some of the big challenges that you're facing and how the pandemic has impacted your work. But I want to start out from your days at Rutgers. What brought you to Rutgers Law School in the first place?
Yeah, sure. I went to the University of Notre Dame as an undergrad and played and coached a little bit of baseball there. And then I was an American Studies undergrad. So my degree was in American Studies, which, as some would remind me, meant that I could either take it forward and become a Jeopardy contestant or ultimately go to law school. And so I was actually I'm the son of a social worker, and frankly, the public interest has always been at the heart, of dinner table conversations in my house when I was a kid, and talking about helping those that are in a less fortunate spot. And I frankly went to Rutgers, for two real reasons, or a couple of different reasons. One, obviously, it's commitment to work in the public interest. Two, it was, right there on the doorstep of two excellent legal markets. When I think of legal markets, different law schools around the world, there's very few that are really positioned so well up against the legal market that is New Jersey and the legal market that is New York City. And I consider them a bit of two different legal markets, but they're both thriving. They're both robust, and Rutgers sits really on the doorstep of both of them. And third, I was just familiar with the quality of the education and frankly, the diversity of thought and the diversity of student body that existed there. But I frankly went to law school to ultimately gain a law degree to work in the public interest, which, needless to say, based on my experience at PepsiCo, my tenure at PepsiCo, I failed miserably in achieving my initial goal. But that was really the initial impetus of going to Rutgers.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about some of the work you do at PepsiCo because I'm not so sure that you failed. And I know that you are very active in the philanthropic community, so I want to talk about that as well. When you applied to Rutgers, were you in New Jersey, New York? Where were you living at the time?
After leaving Notre Dame and leaving, a fledgling career in college baseball, I actually went back to my hometown of Rochester, New York. It was actually at the times of the Clarence Thomas hearings, and I was essentially, applying to law schools while I was living under my parents' roof, holding my degree from Notre Dame, and actually watched just about every minute of the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings, which was, almost shocking and amazing. And who knew that it was going to portend, confirmation hearings in years to come and decades to come. But ultimately made my way down to Rutgers at the time. the wonderful person that I was dating and would later and soon be engaged with, and who I ultimately married while in law school, was got a sales territory down in northern New Jersey, which really got me to look at the schools down here. And there was Rutgers, which was a wonderful find, which I hadn't targeted it, sitting up in Rochester. But once Margaret got the job down here in northern New Jersey, we essentially both came down to this area.
I remember the Clarence Thomas hearings well. I remember them going past midnight on the East Coast. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
They very different than today. The hearings were, it almost felt like they were 24/7, and it was a pretty intense and I think dramatic time in American history. So I guess that probably helped reinforce your desire to be a lawyer.
It certainly did. There was amidst all the, kind of the emotion and issues that flooded those hearings. I was looking at those hearings really through the lens of an aspiring law student at the time, and just the constitutional division of responsibilities and duties, and being anchored in the executive branch nominating, and the Senate confirming and holding the hearings, was all intriguing to me. And so those hearings, as much as they're remembered for a lot of different reasons, for me, again, as an aspiring law student, were actually very educational. They were very fascinating, and actually formed a good kind of priming the pump, for what became a legal education.
Talk to me a little bit about your time at Rutgers. I guess it would have been from 92 to 95.
Yeah, exactly right. It was the perfect, from my perspective, and I felt it when it was when I was in it, and certainly reflected upon it after I left. And what a great place to go to school. I mean, it really, as I mentioned, I went to really work in the public interest, and the history of this school, and the legacy that it holds, doing all its work and in a very progressive civil rights agenda, was awesome, and it was a great attraction to me. And at the same time, I really looked at it as a place that was, a stone's throw from the financial capital of the world, and this incredible market in New Jersey, which has everything from, inner city clinics and real people, frontline people issue support, to the animal rights work, to frankly a huge corporate environment. And what I found at Rutgers was this incredible blend of, both on the curriculum as well within the student body, just a diversity of thoughts, a diversity of curriculum and courses, and certainly a diversity of people, not just from racial or LGBTQ, but really diversity of thought, and a lot of different perspectives and backgrounds. And frankly, for me, coming from Notre Dame, which I totally loved as an undergrad program, and it was a wonderful place to go to school, and I love the place. It was much more homogeneous than what I found at law school, and relative to the Rutgers experience and my Rutgers Law School education, and just wanting to become a well-grounded, well-thinking attorney at the time, there couldn't have been a better place, frankly, to go to law school. It was a wonderful experience.
What were some of your most interesting or most influential classes that you took?
I still, to this day, and I don't do a good job of going back and saying thank you on a regular basis to Professor Pope and Professor Chen and George Thomas and criminal procedure. Well, I remember a really fascinating class with Bill Bratton, who I think's down at University of Pennsylvania now, but he taught our initial contracts class, and he did it in a very Socratic way, where amidst a class of a sizable class of a couple dozen people, there was two people in the hot seat on any given day. And to this day, I just remember being put kind of in the spotlight by Professor Bratton, and frankly being put under the screws to answer questions back and forth against a whole series of hypotheticals, and being totally stumped at one point on a relatively simple question where all he wanted to hear was the word warranty, and that word was not coming to my mind, and everybody around me started whispering warranty, as Professor Bratton would not let me off the hook. And it was a wonderful experience, not even just for the substance of the class, but the experience of frankly being people as lawyers. We're essentially paid to be counselors and to express ideas and to come up with solutions. And being in the crucible of having to speak and articulate and to come up with a thought process was part of the education that I got there, and it was wonderful. And I remember exchanges with Professor Thomas in criminal procedure classes on a number of issues that were just really engaging and really thoughtful, and pushing and prodding. I just know that I came out of Rutgers Law, frankly, stronger, both from a thinking process and a verbal expression prospect than I went into the school. So, I left better than I walked into, to the school as being.
And of course, Professors Thomas, Chan, and Pope are still there, and extremely popular professors. Professor Thomas has probably been named Professor of the Year more than any other professor on the faculty. He's extremely popular, just really a giant, I think, in the area of criminal law. So you were very fortunate to have.
I had the pleasure of, and he won't know it, but I do. I had the pleasure of being handed my diploma by Professor Thomas as I crossed the stage at graduation and stuff, and that was always very meaningful to me because I would agree with the assessment. He was a great professor, and thrilled that he's still there.
Yeah, I've often thought of like putting together a series of testimonials of successful lawyers and judges about the anxiety of the first year, because I know that our first year students, really experience that a lot in terms of whether they're picking it up and whether they're getting it. So I think it's always useful to hear from people like yourself who, has had such an incredibly successful run, to hear about you not being able to come up with the word warranty during the first year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a, often when I think about the law and I think about, the curriculum, which is, as I mentioned, really diverse and I think appropriately built to handle so many different kinds of students and interests. And people think about the substance of all those areas, but really the biggest takeaway for me, I haven't done anything with really criminal law or criminal procedure since I left law school. I clerked for a year, but beyond that, I really haven't applied any of that. But the thinking and the raw skills that you build and the thinking process and the analytical pushing and prodding and testing and building of a capability, kind of some of those foundational skills of just reading, writing, and communicating. That's what I remember most about my Rutgers experience, was just having the opportunity to really develop in those areas within the context of studying some fascinating subject matter areas. But it's really those raw skills that I took away.
And then how long after leaving Rutgers was it before you ended up at PepsiCo?
As I mentioned, I went to Rutgers to be in the public interest, and then, if you do well in law school, essentially the law industry, the legal industry is kind of channeled to kind of, at least make opportunities available to you in the classic kind of legal hierarchy sense, which are big firms and, clerkships and stuff. And I was fortunate enough to do well in law school, which just opened up doors that, frankly, when I walked into Rutgers, 3 years before that, I hadn't really thought of. And so I did summer after my second year at Fried Frank over in New York City, and that's ended up where I ended up going to work initially out of law school. Part of that may have been that I had my first child while a third year in as a law student. So there was a need to actually go make a few dollars and pay down some debt. So there I went to Fried Frank. I stayed there for a short period of time, only about 2.5 years. I had a 1 year clerkship as well, and then 3.5 years after Rutgers in the end of 1998, I was walking into PepsiCo, and I've been there ever since.
What was your first job at PepsiCo? I think you told me you were the absolute lowest person on the totem pole in the legal department.
I was, it's a great story. At Fried Frank, I was working on a lot of the compensation and benefits and kind of people issues on a lot of M&A transactions, which nurtured my soul a little bit as somebody that wanted to work with people as close as you can get to people, kind of in at least that long law firm sense. And it from your career at the EEOC, is you deal with substantive issues that have people, behind every one of the issues. That's really what I was doing at Fried Frank. And so I was able to translate that actually into a job. And when I walked into PepsiCo, I was at the time the only non-executive attorney, in the United States. And my first title was ERISA attorney, because I actually knew what ERISA meant. And we certainly had plenty of benefit programs that needed legal oversight. And that's what my role was when I walked in the doors in 1998.
And I think at that time, I don't think that Lexis and Westlaw were dominant. I think they were probably coming in to their own. So I would imagine that PepsiCo actually had a real legal library.
We did. We had a legal library that actually had books and paper, and we'd get weekly updates. From at that time, I was reading a lot of Department of Labor updates, because a lot of ERISA comes out of agency rulings and regulatory guidance, and there was regular subscriptions and things you'd have to stick into a 3-ring binder to keep yourselves updated and stuff. And it was hardly that email was coming on board at the time. And I remember maybe 2 or 3 years after I'd been there, seeing people with their first Blackberries and those kind of things. So it was actually the dawn of technology for sure from a professional perspective.
But are you like me? Do you like miss the feel of the reporters in your hands?
I do. I do. And now we're appropriately aging. Now we're appropriately aging each other, where I do. I still, amidst all the push in technology and the Zoom world that we're all living in currently and stuff, I actually still get a hard newspaper. I still get the New York Times, and I like flipping the pages. And I think that's partly based on my history of flipping a lot of pages early in my legal career.
Yeah, and it's better since the ink doesn't run off on your fingers like it used to back in the day.
Exactly. Exactly.
The Times fixed the ink. So then 20 years later, you're the general counsel. How did that happen? Was that your goal when you walked in? You're like, I'm going to be the general counsel of PepsiCo, or was it just sort of more organic that you found a great organization you love working with and people you love working with?
Yeah, you look at, I never thought I'd go to one of those big firms. I ended up at one of those big firms and really enjoyed the experience. And I really thought I would, frankly, then translate that into, going to work for a company, which was PepsiCo. And I thought I'd stay there for 2 or 3 years and then think about moving back to Rochester, which is, my wife's hometown. I frankly, early on, I was just kind of doing things that I thought were interesting to do for the next 2 years. I had no aspiration to be, a company general counsel, or I didn't have a lot of clear goals, to be frank. And one of the things I'd say to anybody that's a law student or an aspiring lawyer today is, while I've always admired a lot of people who had very clear, targeted positions, goals, or career path, I never had one of those. I was just trying to do things for the next 2 years that would give me greater experience that I found interesting to do, where I could work with good people on good matters. I found that at Fried Frank. I found that in a 1-year clerkship that I did, and then when I got to PepsiCo, it was really an exercise in just embracing what was running around. I had this title of ERISA attorney, which I did a lot of work obviously on the employee benefit plans, but there's a lot of other things floating around the PepsiCo offices, and no company's really staffed to have experts in every area. And so you could just kind of gravitate and grab on to different little projects that were kind of floating around the department or that didn't have a natural home on somebody's desk. And then for me, the real fortunate thing in an odd way was that Sarbanes-Oxley was passed right around there in that 2000, 2001. So Sarbanes-Oxley is essentially it's named after a couple of legislators that essentially, in the wake of some corporate fallouts of fraud and some poor controls within a corporate environment that would have assured the integrity of financial statements, there was some real big fallouts right around 2000. Namely with a company named Enron. But essentially, in the wake of a corporate fraud or financial integrity fallout, essentially new laws and new regulations came into enactment and were passed to essentially build more assurance and more process and more cross-checking that really sat on the desks of lawyers and accountants to ensure that companies' financial statements reflected accurately the performance of the company. And so it just came with it's a whole bunch of new regulations that frankly were being printed every other month, because there was a lot of response to the integrity fallouts in corporate America. And this was the response. And the opportunity that it provided to me was that anybody had an opportunity to be an expert in essentially this brand new series of laws and regulations, because they were being newly printed for the first time, and they were setting up a lot of new governance structures, a lot of new regulatory requirements, but they were really new to the corporate world. And so anybody can be an expert if you were just willing to read them and absorb them and work with an internal team, as I did with PepsiCo, to implement those. And that kind of took me from being a people attorney and an ERISA attorney to being something broader. And so in that way, it essentially was an opportunity that just presented itself. And there I was, just kind of being one of the folks that was reading all these things that were being newly enacted.
And then that was your springboard, so to speak, to become general counsel?
Yeah, well, I was a springboard into, I was blessed to work for PepsiCo, a place that I'm really proud to work at, but also a place that's not afraid to take people. In my case, a young lawyer who had just shown an ability to work hard and get along with other people. And while they were doing this job over there, we're a kind of place, and PepsiCo is a kind of company that if you do your current job really well, they'll essentially give you a chance to do another job. And that job is often a job that you never would have gotten on the street because you didn't really have the background or experiences to warrant getting that opportunity with somebody that didn't know you. But within the walls of PepsiCo, everybody has, as they go through your career, everybody has a brand, a personal brand that people get to know and that you're known for. And within PepsiCo, essentially, you can leverage that brand to get opportunities again that you couldn't get, at some other company. And frankly, my career ended up just being a series of being open and having access to opportunities that were new and different. And frankly, my career ladder became, hey, if I can find something to do for the next 2 years that was going to teach me something new, and then I could work with good people, I was good to go do that. And then I'd figure out the next thing 2 years later. And it's just kind of worked. And I never would have been able to predict how it would have unfolded. I just knew that I was kind of working in this 2 year block mentality. And 22 years later, there's been, 10 plus blocks of that philosophy that's just played out. Admittedly, in an environment where, a lot of hard work and a lot of luck ended up triggering moments of success. But it's been a fascinating ride.
How would you describe your personal brand?
I'm not really comfortable speaking about myself, but I have, people do ask me like, how the heck did this happen? And I'd be the first person to say that I'm surprised that I have the role that I have. But when you ask people around me, and I think in some ways it's instructive as to at least what some lawyers can think about being. At PepsiCo, we're essentially a service department. We're there to support and help and guide the business as much as possible. And so you have to be a bit humble in some sense that it's not really our bubblegum stand. There's other business leaders that are making the agenda and driving the agenda. I think as I've carried out that my role as that within PepsiCo, people would tell you that I work hard. I work hard to help other people. Frankly, helping others is in my nature. So being in a bit more of a service role was an easy thing for me. It played to my aptitudes as a human, and I do like helping others. And I think I understand other people. As I mentioned, I'm the son of a social worker. We spent a lot of time as a kid, and I still do to this day with my dad, talking about other people and being able to have EQ part of your makeup as a lawyer helps. Some clients need to be nudged and influenced. Other clients need to be scared, into doing right things and good things. But my brand, I think, is just somebody who's authentic, who works hard, who cares about others more than he does himself. And frankly, for me, I'm all about what's best for PepsiCo. And at various points in time, in really the crucible of really tough situations, I think I've had the opportunity to show that the organization was always number one to me, and I was always going to advocate for whatever was best for the organization. That's without regard to myself. That's without regard to necessarily individual leaders who viewed me as their critical counselor. But if they were about to do something that wasn't in PepsiCo's interest, or whether they had to move roles or leave PepsiCo because it was in PepsiCo's interests, while I'm a humble service provider, I'm also confident enough to make tough decisions and to advocate for difficult things from time to time. And so I always like to tell the lawyers that work in our shop now that we should be folks that don't need to be in the spotlight to feel good and valid about being a member of the team. But my gosh, when the spotlight shines on you, you better be ready to sing and dance and perform and stuff, because every company and every organization is really a performance oriented place. You got to be able to do your job and do it well and compel people to get behind the counsel and the advice that you're providing and stuff. You can't be shy, but at the same time, you can't try to inject yourself into a spotlight when it's not your time to be in the spotlight. And so it's a little bit of a trick in some ways, but more than anything, I think I'm an authentic, high integrity person, both personally and professionally. And I think that's what people want in lawyers at the end of the day.
And I guess I'm wondering, because you talk about service and you talk about your parents, I'm wondering how much of this is grounded in faith.
Yeah. Well, look at, a lot. Everybody's got, their own impetus for being whoever they are, and, the whatever foundational blocks they hold. I'm amongst the fortunate, and I start every day with gratitude for, having come from good folks who taught values, and frankly, I was raised in a Catholic household where we were taught values and taught to think about others first. And I've watched my dad, who here he is at 80 years old today, and he still's working in a juvenile detention center, counseling kids and trying to help them, especially those that have suicidal tendencies. And to have that foundation and to have that role model, that from somebody who I love and who loves me back, is really core. And I wish that upon everybody in our society, and too few kids have all that. So I consider myself fortunate, and certainly giving back and trying to pay that forward is a big part. But and my faith certainly played in that role as well, played in that foundational basis as well.
Well, it sounds like besides sharing a name, we both really share a background. My father was an eighth grade teacher
Yep.
until he passed. And, both of my parents would always really instill the values of service. And so much of that for them was really grounded in their faith. So, a lot of what you're saying is resonating. So let's talk about your average day at PepsiCo as general counsel. And we'll start pre-pandemic because I would imagine the pandemic has had some impact. But just talk about last January. What would an average day look like for the general counsel at PepsiCo?
My average day is really rooted in kind of who I guess I have a dozen direct reports, and half of them are essentially general counsels of different regions around the world. And so there's a general counsel out in the Asia Pacific region. There's a general counsel down in Latin America. There's a general counsel in the Middle East and Africa, and one in Europe, and two here in the U.S. And so that's half my direct reports. And the other half of my direct reports are the head of compliance and ethics, our corporate secretary team who handles all of our public, company responsibilities. We have a lead employment attorney, a head, IP and trademarks attorney. And so amidst those general counsel or amidst those direct reports, it essentially maps out kind of what I do every day in terms of the subject matter. I'll be getting updates from different parts of the world on different things. At any point in time, there may be a compliance and ethics issue. We may be preparing to release a 10K or a 10Q or an earnings release and going through that stuff, or going to the capital markets to place a bond or something. There's obviously a big team under all those folks. And so just managing the department, managing a budget, managing the people movements, trying to think about career development of our teams is where I spend a lot of my time. And at the end of the day, I'm really kind of the direct lawyer for our CEO, our board of directors, and other members of the senior management team. And so I'm their first call if they have a legal issue, and those might come from any direction on any given day. But we have 5 board meetings a year, and we spend a lot of time shaping the materials and the agenda for those. At any point in time, we're searching for a new board member to add to the board. And so, frankly, the best part of my job is the variety of things that I get to deal with. And the world, as I mentioned before, gets smaller because you hear about things that are going on in every corner. And frankly, at least with our CEO and the board, I get to shine a light and show the great work that our legal teams are doing all around the globe, which is really fun. And over my 22 years, PepsiCo has been really successful at both delivering performance, from a financial perspective, but trying to do the right thing. We're very progressive and trying to, alter the world from, what's going on with plastics to, the ingredients in our products, and trying to reduce sugar and salt and fat out of our products to make them healthier. And so there's a lot of things going on at any point in time. So average day is hard to come by, but it's a general sense of the scope of what's going on.
And I want to get into some of the good things that you're doing at PepsiCo, because I know that you're very involved with the Rutgers Law Center for Corporate Governance. So I want to talk about that a bit. But I'm just thinking about your role in a global company. And, you said that you shine a light globally, but I would imagine, some of the compliance challenges at a global company can be incredibly daunting and immense. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Dean. The difficulty of being, frankly, a U.S.-based multinational that works in, those 200 countries is that, not everybody's moral compass is built the same in all these places. And as I like to say, there's different ways of doing business in different parts of the world, and to try to maintain and hold your standards and expectations of conduct, which we do, runs in the face of some of how business is done in some places. And it's at times it puts us at a competitive disadvantage, frankly, because there are moments and situations in certain countries where, frankly, we just can't do business the way certain business is being done, and our local leaders will look for guidance as to how to perform. And fortunately, and frankly, the only reason I've worked at PepsiCo for so long is that anytime that I've ever confronted a leader, with the facts about what's going on, and the repercussions if we don't follow our own expectations for behaving and doing things the right way, people have made the right decision. We just have a culture that feeds on itself in terms of doing stuff right. But it's difficult. I remember one situation in a country that I'll skip the name of and stuff, but we were literally just building a new factory, which was really representative of economic activity and being able to, bring jobs to a certain area. And in order to turn the factory on after we had it built, we needed, an inspector to come and do a final run through. And as we called the plant manager called to have the inspector come out, the inspector essentially from the government essentially said, look, and I have a lot to do. So if you want me to come out to look at your plant anytime in the near future, you'll kind of have to make it worth my while, and had a certain, couple of demands on the back end of that. And our plant manager, called up. I was actually the head of compliance and ethics at the time. This is back in 2012 or 13. And he was like, what am I supposed to do? I got to turn this plant on. The inspector is essentially saying he's not going to come visit my plant unless I, give him some gratuities of some sort, which are totally against our ways of working. And so, he didn't provide it, the gratuities. We ultimately kind of went up the government agency chain through a government affairs perspective, and it all worked out. We didn't have to compromise our ways, but just being confronted with those situations on a regular basis is pretty much the norm. But you got to stick, and we'd like to build our house out of brick, and you do that by operating the right way. And again, I'm just proud of the place for always having done it. But it's also an exercise in influence as a lawyer to make sure that good people aren't going to make a bad decision, under the crucible of having to perform.
Yeah, that's a very challenging story, I can imagine. You talked about what you liked about Rutgers Law School. Talk a little bit. I know that we did this offline,
Yep.
but talk a little bit about really the thread through the years from your time at Rutgers Law School and the way you approach your job now as General Counsel at PepsiCo, and some of the lessons that you bring with you and that you share with your organization.
Yeah, look, lessons of, like I mentioned, lessons of a diverse exchange. I mean, to me, these are lessons that all our society and certainly our country could benefit from having now. Is we had vigorous debates at Rutgers. There was a Federalist Society, and there was a very progressive clinic program, and there was such a range of different thoughts within the law school when I went there, and good people and good thoughts and good thinkers and smart people. And frankly, during my time there, we didn't spend our time yelling at each other. There was times of just real, intellectual dialogue and back and forth from two very, at times, opposed perspectives. And I think the ability to, frankly, have two ears and one mouth and use them in proportion, and to hear what other people are saying before you open your mouth, is a skill that we all need to, work on ourselves. I try to work on it every day, and certainly our society needs to work on it better, and to slow down our reaction so you can actually have a substantive dialogue and try to find out some middle ground, or find out what people are saying. And I've been taught so much. I've learned so much by listening, that for those that are interested in continuing their education, you just got to be committed to listening. And I carry that forward, that Rutgers diversity of thought, diversity of perspectives, being able to engage in dialogue that ultimately can alter your opinion, certainly alter your knowledge base, and frankly, have an appreciation that everything's interconnected. Whether you're doing and working in a clinic helping the indigent poor. I worked in a clinic at Rutgers when we were helping people apply for Social Security disability income benefits, to working on tough corporate tax matters. There's all a linkage in there, and so society's interconnected, and there's the more that we bring those things together and have dialogue and get people to be able to talk to each other in rational, thoughtful ways, is really a recipe for finding the best answers to really complex issues and complex problems. And when I talk about the core skills that Rutgers helped build in me, that's really what I bring forward to this day. And those are, enduring, sustainable, really productive skills.
And I know you've also been a champion of a diverse workforce at PepsiCo.
I have been, look, PepsiCo, when you think about its products, everybody in the world is its possible consumer. And so our employee population from the day that I walked into the place has always looked a lot like society. And so it's a given of the business, meaningfulness and the business impact that diversity has. And we've driven it into the law department. Frankly, in my 22 years at PepsiCo, I've worked for 5 different general counsel, 3 of which were African American, 1 of which was a female, 1 of which was a white male. There's a diversity in our department that, frankly, even leads the broader diversity within PepsiCo. And one of my agenda points is not just to maintain the diversity within, the law department of PepsiCo, but to help to build more diversity into the legal profession, which is underrepresented for sure. And so, we have a series of programs and initiatives which either we've built on or my predecessor started. We've continued and strengthened, all designed, which, to make sure that we have a diverse team ourselves, but also that the legal profession is increasingly more diverse and more, reflective of society.
Well, let me use that to sort of jump off and talk a little bit about your work with the Rutgers Corporate Center for Law and Governance. I interviewed the great Doug Eakley on this podcast, and he's a tremendous asset to the law school and just a hell of a nice guy, as they say.
Yep.
Talk about some of the work that you're doing with the corporate center.
Yeah, and you're right to say the great Doug Eakley, because he's really the one that kind of attracted me into the center, and as I've come and done more with the center and just hearing the exchange of ideas, the speakers they get, really with the center's focused on being a forum, really looks at really the cutting edge and the biggest, the most progressive developments in the world of kind of corporate governance and corporate law. And this center is really delving into and frankly propelling the thinking of a lot of cutting edge governance issues, corporate governance issues. And frankly, I hardly knew it when I was in law school, but having been in corporate America for the last 22 years, governance might sound dull and boring, but it is at the core of what makes organizations really strong and really sustainable. And I get a lot of ideas coming out of the governance center and some of the forums that I've been able to participate in with Doug and the rest of the team there. And I think about a forum that I actually participated on maybe a year ago or so about, supply chains and global supply chains and human rights issues within global supply chains, which are issues that we are actively dealing with at PepsiCo. And there was, Rutgers Corporate Governance Center, holding an open forum and a panel discussion on these very current, impactful issues. And Doug and the team, get a lot of credit for creating those forums, and it puts such a good light on, frankly, Rutgers in terms of being able again to have that diversity of everything from civil rights, kind of a legacy to cutting edge corporate governance issues. It's a great blend.
Yeah, and of course, I don't want to neglect Arthur Levy because he's fantastic. Also, I know Doug is on the Newark campus, and one of the things that I think really surprises some people who aren't really paying attention is just really how strong the corporate faculty is at Rutgers Law School and how well meshed it is with the other social justice aspects of the school. It's very harmonized on the ground, and I think so much of that is a reflection of the great work of the corporate center and the board of advisors and the faculty that we have at the school.
Yeah. You can feel the collaboration, and it's the strength of the center, between Arthur and Doug, and multiple campuses, the collaboration, and frankly the variety of ideas and thought leadership that comes out, from good conversation and good collaboration is awesome. It's definitely a positive.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the pandemic and that how that impacted your work.
Yeah.
I would imagine you're working mostly remotely.
Yeah, we're definitely working remotely, and we left the offices there like a lot of people in March, 11th, 12th, 13th, somewhere in there of 2020, and we haven't been back. And at least here in the U.S., we've announced that we won't reopen our offices until at least next March. of 2021. So we'll be out, with offices closed for, at least a year. We've closed offices in virtually every part of the world. In some jurisdictions, we've reopened them only to reclose them. So it's been essentially a living exercise in, how to take folks that were pretty used to paper and in-person meetings and turn them into digitally savvy and, electronically oriented communicators. And it's actually gone very well. So we're getting all the work done for sure, albeit from a remote perspective all around the globe. And at the same time, in some ways, we're more connected because everybody's embraced, online meetings and Zoom meetings, and we have them with a greater frequency. You don't quite feel the depth of personal connectivity as you do when you're with people, but it's better than a phone call, and it's better than not being in contact. And so it's going pretty well. Like I like to tell people internally, we're getting the work done. I'm not sure we've totally figured out how to work in terms of preserving all the good parts of our culture. So we still have a little work to do to make sure that we're staying intimately connected, just not connected to get the work done, but really connected in a way that maintains a really healthy culture. But it's been a heck of an exercise, for everybody to essentially have to take this very quick turn over the last 7 or 8 months and find new ways of working and just find a way to keep going and keep moving forward. And for PepsiCo, it's certainly been a challenge because our business has been operational.
But do you think it's going to have some long-term impact on the business model of PepsiCo?
As a food and beverage business, we were deemed an essential business, and so we could stay in operation. And we've been, working hard to make sure that we could comply with all the, the federal and state and municipal and local regulations about what it means to stay in operation and keep your employees safe and keep the retailers, the frontline workers of the places we're delivering product to safe. We're doing all that. And in terms of the long-term impact of how we work, it's definitely going to have an impact. I think the days of kind of being defaulted into 5 days in the office, I don't think we'll come back. I think there's a lot of positives that come with working remotely, and just the efficiency and productivity comes with not having to commute, especially in a tri-state area around New York City like ours, where the commute, on any given day can be pretty tough for some folks. It gives us more flexibility in some ways to allow people to do, cross-jurisdictional work or not necessarily have to be in an office to be a productive member of a team. So I think it's going to change for sure. And, it certainly has accelerated the adoption of technology, certainly within the law department, but I'm sure in corporate America in general. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like as we come out of this, but I think it's going to be different for sure. And I think we'll work hard to try to take the good things about this and take the great things about how we worked and how we did things and built culture and teams before the pandemic, and try to combine those into what will inevitably be a new way of working and a new model, which will be different, but hopefully will be better, frankly, than it is now, even within COVID and it was before COVID.
And then in the midst of this great pandemic, following the killing of George Floyd, there was what I would call a great reckoning as well.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about how that impacted PepsiCo?
Yeah, well, we certainly felt it. Our Pepsi business has a great legacy, kind of, especially with the Black community, and having a dedicated Black sales force in the 1940s, and the first ever vice president at a multinational U.S. corporation, African American vice president, back in 1962. There's a legacy that kind of flows through our business, and so in the wake of the George Floyd killing and essentially the uprising of voices, we had all those dialogues going on internally as well, appropriately so. And like I said before, using your ears, your two ears in proportion to your one mouth, was exactly what we ended up doing. And it was, we always think of ourselves as a really diverse, open, positive culture, which we are. But we still had work to do. We had listening to do, and we found, pockets of pain within our own employee base. And so we went and took this external environment and brought it inside to really listen to our people. I went out and had one-on-one meetings with each of the African American attorneys that we have working for us in the U.S. and just listened to people's personal experiences, listen to people's professional perspectives, and I think we learned a lot. And as we built our own response which we've now rolled out both against the Black constituent, but also the Hispanic constituent now. Our CEO and our senior management team, had one guiding light, and that's what, we were going to do what it took to make our employees proud. It wasn't some external optic thing that we were trying to get to. It wasn't a program that we were trying to roll out to get kudos from anybody externally. It was really to build on the existing pride in PepsiCo and make it that much stronger. And so, we went out, as many companies have done now, but we honed in on what our goals were going to be in terms of representation at all levels. We've opened up the transparency about our workforce demographics, which is now all available on our website. And we built programs both within our buying power, meaning within our supply department and buying groups, to community-oriented programs where we got a lot of effort to support Black-owned businesses and Brown-owned businesses, especially in the restaurant space, which is consistent with where we play from a business. But there's been a real positive, I think, up against tragic and painful backdrop, some real positives that have come out. And look, we got to carry forward and carry through our commitments. And so, hopefully, as I mentioned, governance is important. The governance around not just getting programs built and responsive actions articulated, but now you need governance to ensure that you're measuring your progress, over the next number of years. And that's what we aspire to do for sure.
That's excellent. I know that you're doing good things at PepsiCo, but I know that this commitment to service is something that stuck with you throughout your career, and that you're very involved in other service activities. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I got really, when I got to PepsiCo, I found an organization that was certainly, well connected to community efforts and philanthropic efforts. And that, as I mentioned, definitely plays to my heart and, kind of my way of being and trying to give back. And so it was a real blessing and a gift to be able to kind of leverage the scale and resources of PepsiCo and then try to combine that with some community efforts. And so for a good 20 years now, I've really been working hard with two different nonprofit organizations. One, the United Way, just up in our 2-county area of Westchester and Putnam counties north of New York City. But secondly, an organization called the Pro Bono Partnership, which is a nonprofit that's dedicated to providing essentially transactional pro bono legal services to not-for-profit entities. And so you think of every nonprofit entity, skipping the constituents that they're trying to help and support and stuff. Every one of those entities has their own legal needs, from leases to employment issues to bylaw issues to sometimes IP issues. And so the Pro Bono Partnership really is designed to leverage in-house legal expertise, because we're transactional attorneys at the core, and bring those services to bear on the not-for-profit community. And so what I like both about the United Way and the Pro Bono Partnership is that they're both kind of at the infrastructure of society. Both are trying to essentially build stronger infrastructure, within the communities we work in. And I've been personally involved in a lot of those with a lot of support from PepsiCo, and again, being able to bring some of the scale and resources that PepsiCo has to both of those organizations that really work here in the tri-state area. And the separate part to me is I've gotten to know a tremendous number of great people outside of PepsiCo through both of those organizations, and got into board meetings and learned a lot about board governance through those organizations, and frankly, financial management through those organizations. And so the not-for-profit experiences I've had have been gratifying and hopefully helpful to the communities, but also educational and developmental for me on a number of fronts. And now I've had the pleasure and the honor to chair both of the boards of those two organizations, which was another skill building and a fascinating learning experience and stuff. So it's been so positive on so many fronts, but most notably nurturing, my own soul and need to make sure that I'm engaged with the community and helping others.
So if any of our listeners want to get involved, how can they get involved?
There are so many pro bono opportunities. Obviously, in the Rutgers community, there's all kinds of clinics that you can get involved in. But if there's in-house lawyers or even law firm lawyers that want to get involved, there's obviously a lot of equal justice organizations where you can help individuals directly. You can also go to probonopartnership.org, at least in the tri-state area and stuff. And those are more built for opportunities for transactional lawyers who don't really know the inside of a courtroom or don't know what it's like to advocate for an individual. You can leverage your own professional skills and stuff to do some good.
One of the things that I don't know if you ever studied with L. Slocum.
No, I know exactly who he was. I never had him, but I know exactly who he is.
So he used to always talk about the Rutgers conspiracy, which is sort of an idea that I've appropriated. And the whole idea of the Rutgers conspiracy is that we want Rutgers people everywhere and that they go everywhere. And so, certainly on this show, we've talked to people who have done so many different things. And we know that we have people who are CEOs and general counsels of sports teams and federal judges and academics and working in the nonprofit sector, heading up advocacy organizations. So we're really all over the place. What would you tell students who are interested in sort of exploring in-house careers? What advice would you give to our students who are listening, or potential applicants who are listening about exploring in-house legal careers?
In-house legal is obviously more transactional than anything, but there's a lot of different in-house environments. I think it often, we're not really built in-house to train up new attorneys, but we do, at least in our shop, we do believe in people learning as they go. And so I do think there's a necessity to at least start out in a firm and go gain, or an agency, or to develop some substantive, if not expertise, really deep understanding of a certain area that you can then leverage into an in-house opportunity. And they're fewer and harder to find. And so hopefully you get to a position, out of law school that you can settle into, develop expertise, again, learn a lot of those skills in terms of just being able to articulate and communicate and humbly be a member of a team with the confidence necessary to advise folks and work on those raw skills, develop some subject matter expertise, and then work hard and try to be a little bit patient. I know when I was coming out of Freed Frank, I was really getting good experience, and I enjoyed what I was doing. It's just that it wasn't the environment that I wanted to continue to grow in, and I was looking for another opportunity, but it took a little while, and you had to be patient because it can be just a difficult thing to find the right spot and the right geography, the right level, and all that stuff. So there's a little bit more probably patience that needs to be done. So you got to start your search early after you've developed some skill set, and then be ready to drop some lines in the water. Certainly connecting with colleagues. Anybody's welcome to call me. I talk to a lot of different people about different paths and different things to work on, and so hopefully they can tap into the alumni network as well. I should mention that I went to Freed Frank because a Rutgers Law alum interviewed me, and he was awesome, and I had gravitated towards him and his approach, and in some ways followed him to Freed Frank, or went off in that direction because of that. And so there's a great network of alums, from Rutgers and stuff. But raw skills, working hard, and getting along with people is my basic path towards to career success. Look, I'd give a shout out to the Rutgers community. Like I said, I think I knew a little bit of the benefits of what the law school would do for me. When I walked into the place, I had no idea how good and how door opening it would be. It's so well positioned, just from kind of the building of the curriculum to its physical geography and just the raw skills. It's a great place to launch from, and hopefully everybody that's either thinking about Rutgers or has gone there or is currently going there, comes with some appreciation for what it's done, and you carry forward the great set of alums and the great faculty that work there. And so it was a wonderful place for me to start, and I still have great appreciation, and my work with the school to this day continues to be very fulfilling.
Well, thank you. And you've definitely made us proud, and thank you for all that you give back to the school and all that you give back to the community. I think you're a real demonstration in the importance of adhering to what I keep calling old school values, but it really comes down to, just treating each other respectfully, being thankful for your blessings, and giving back.
Well, and thank you, Dean. There's a lot of great stuff going on at the school, and you get a lot of credit for that, along with your co-dean and the rest of the faculty. It's great to see all the good stuff that's going on there.
Thank you very much. I know that we're very proud of you and the work that you've done. Power of Attorney is produced by Rutgers Law School. With 2 locations minutes from Philadelphia and New York City, Rutgers Law offers the prestige and reputation of a large, nationally known university with a personal, small campus experience. Learn more about Rutgers Law by visiting law.rutgers.edu.